far as the Krafts, do I think they've made a decision amongst themselves to part ways with Bill after the season? Yes. Do I think it happened after the Colts game during that bye week? Most likely, but there was still the chance that they could run the table. I mean, they were 2-8 at the time.
Yeah.
They could win 7 straight and finish 9-8 and be in the playoff picture. And so, do I think they made a definitive decision right then? No, but I think we all knew where this was going, and I think that could things change? Absolutely. I think that things could change. I don't know if they have changed, but I just think that I don't think that Robert wants to part ways with Bill at the end of the day. I really don't. I don't think he wants that on his resume. After Tom Brady left and won a Super Bowl, and Bill could do the same thing. And that Bill's so strongly aligned with the brand of the Patriots and the greatness, and it's sort of the allure for at least some fans that Bill could get his groove back here, and we could win another title.
Can the Patriots make it back-to-back? Can they win 2 games in a row this season when they have 3 total? Chiefs coming to town on Sunday. We'll talk about that game. He's Greg, I'm Nick. First episode is brought to you by FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Headlines, Greg. There are lots of headlines when you have a sucky team because people talk and things are reported. So this week it was Tom Curran, NBC Sports Boston. Tommy has been on the beat for a long time, decades. And he reported earlier this week that Robert Kraft and company made the decision to part ways with Bill Belichick after the Colts game in Germany. So you have to go back to November. We all know how that game ended. Game ends. Tommy says the conversations that he has had with people at that time around the situation said, it's going to happen. They're going to mutually part ways. Just going to wait until the end of the season. Just your initial thoughts on Tom's report before we get into what you have heard, what you know or don't know.
First of all, I would say that there are few reporters around here that I respect more than Tom. I mean, really, Tom and Mike and Karen, they're sort of my contemporaries on, we've been covering the NFL for, 20 years each. And Tom is plugged in. Tom, when it comes to the background stuff with the franchise, a lot of his reporting on Tom Brady and his departure from the organization, Tom's really good at that stuff. So when he says things like this, it definitely makes me pay attention. I will say that I have nothing to refute his report. I have nothing to back up his report either. I can only sort of give you my thoughts, and obviously once Tom reported this, I've been talking to as many people as I can to see if this is something to be worried about. And sorry, I'm just muting my phone because I just got a text and it's distracting. There are certain things that make me think that the report is correct. Do I think that in the Kraft's mind, like just Robert and Jonathan, do I think after that game that, and the bye week was after that game, do I think they went home and talked amongst themselves or talked amongst a very small circle and said, where are we going with this? Yeah, probably those conversations took place. I mean, the Krafts aren't somebody who's going to be like, we're going to make the decision to part ways with Bill Belichick, the best coach of all time. We're not going to arrive at that decision until January 8th, the day after the last game. And then we're going to make a decision and then it's over. No, this is something that's going to be discussed and talked about
right,
for weeks leading up to that. Do I think that the Krafts amongst themselves came to that decision, or at least very strong leaning, like we know where this is going, we're going to have to part ways with Bill after the season? Yeah, I probably think that. do I think that they've held a meeting with Bill to sort of start the process on this? No, I don't think that's happened. And I do think that Bill, when it comes time to meet with Robert after the season, and Robert might go in there and Jonathan might build them up. They might be in there together and be like, all right, this is what we have to do. We have to stick to our guns. And do I think that the Krafts, that's the way they're going? Yes. But do I think that it's just going to be that simple that Kraft walks in and says, yeah, Bill, I think it's run its course here. We're going to go in a different direction. Not necessarily. I think that Bill's going to make an argument for himself. I think there's going to be a lot of excuse making, and things like that. And I think the other big component of this, we'll actually get into this in a second, as far as, Bill and his maneuvers and how he's going to handle this. But as far as the Krafts, do I think they've made a decision amongst themselves to part ways with Bill after the season? Yes. Do I think it happened after the Colts game during that bye week? Most likely. But, there was still the chance that they could run the table. I mean, they were 2-8 at the time.
Yeah.
They could win 7 straight and finish 9-8 and be in the playoff picture. And so, do I think they made a definitive decision right then? No, but I think we all knew where this was going. And I think that could things change? Absolutely. I think that things could change. I don't know if they have changed, but I just think that I don't think that Robert wants to part ways with Bill at the end of the day. I really don't. I don't think he wants that on his resume. After Tom Brady left and won a Super Bowl, and Bill could do the same thing. And that Bill's so strongly aligned with the brand of the Patriots and the greatness, and it's sort of the allure for at least some fans that Bill could get his groove back here, and we could win another title. And I do think he's a really, really good game planner. Knows how the team needs to play that week to beat that opponent. I don't think there's anybody better. Now, do I have issues with his personnel? Hell yeah. Do I have issues with his in-game coaching and decisions as far as fourth downs and things like that? Yes. But Bill's still pretty damn good. So the bottom line is, do I think it's 100% set that Bill will no longer be the Patriots coach after this season? My gut tells me no. I don't think that's definitive yet.
Just a couple things on the timeline here. November 1st, right around that time, was when Mike Florio came out, and all of this stuff started to pick up. Florio talking about within league circles, the whispers, all that stuff, the Washington Commanders idea. That was November 1st. So you're talking about just around 2 weeks later where this decision was reportedly made, that Kraft said enough is enough, we've got to move on. So that was around November 12th. Also, don't forget, Rob Ninkovich came out publicly and talked about how angry Jonathan Kraft was in the suite during that Colts game. And leading into that was the video seen around the world of the Kraft having the conversation in the suite. So all of this is very believable. Florio brings it up November 1st and says, people are talking, there's struggles going on, Belichick could be gone, and it would make some sense. Then you had the in the suite thing between the Krafts that we all saw, followed by the Colts game, which was a nightmare. Kraft, according to Ninkovich, kind of losing his mind in the box at that time. So you could certainly kind of put those pieces together and say the Krafts got to the point where they said enough's enough. You could believe that. If it is correct, and the Krafts feel like it's time to move on, couple of questions for you, Greg. And you touched on this a little bit, but you didn't really dive deep into it. How much do you think has been figured out behind the scenes? That's my first question to you. If this has been decided, and it's one of those things of like, hey, unless Bill Belichick does something crazy, like if they run the table and they win those games by like an average of like 2 touchdowns, I don't know what it would take. But how much has been figured out? You said you don't believe they've approached Belichick, but do you think this is something where they're doing what you said they should do, which is start making phone calls, start having conversations with people that have been within this program before? How much of that legwork has been done over the past month if this was decided a month ago?
To this point, not much. I do think that some of those things, might happen in the near future at some point. I think that the Krafts are no dummies. They're very good, especially Robert. He loves to talk to people. He loves to talk to smart people. He's going to make a well-informed decision. So I think some of that will go on. I don't think it's gone on to this point, or at least there hasn't been a big effort to do that at this point in time.
The other question has to do with what you wanted to take a look at next, which is how will Bill Belichick handle this? What is Bill thinking? Here's my question to you on it, Greg. You wrote your list of things that you think Bill would have to do when the season was over to keep his gig. And you mentioned in the podcast earlier in the week that you don't believe Bill would do many of them, if any of them. But what if there was one condition? What if Kraft simply asked Belichick to no longer deal with personnel? If that was Kraft's one condition, would Belichick acquiesce to that? Would he finally give in and say, you know what, I want to stay in New England. I've been here forever. Robert and I have a trustworthy relationship. I'll give that one thing up. It's a big thing. It's a huge thing. Would he do it?
It's a great question, Nick. It's something that I've asked a lot of people who know Bill Belichick, and let's start off with this, is that nobody really knows. Bill is he's his own country. He's his own counsel. He doesn't talk to anybody about this stuff. And I know he's focused on the Chiefs and about, game planning. He's not sitting on the phone shooting the crap, being, tossing out different scenarios. Like, no, he is still singularly focused on his job from people that I've talked to. I have asked that question of a lot of people. There's a couple of different responses that I've gotten. Most of them say no. I mean, it's not an unequivocal no, but a lot of them, they think you're just inviting a lot more drama into the mix if you decide to do that. So you're going to have Bill Belichick back, who's going to be pissed off that somebody else is overseeing him. Now, let's look at the different scenarios. Like in my column, I brought up that the Krafts could bring in somebody who he knows that he's worked with.
Yep.
And like a Dave Ziegler, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitroff, what have you. The response that I got from that, from people who are familiar with Belichick and the way Patriots do things, is that Belichick wouldn't, those people don't have enough gravitas for Bill to either respect them or for those people to really do their job autonomously from Bill Belichick. They would always sort of go back to, I was an underling of Bill. Like that would just be their default mode. And that's not good for the team. It's not good for anybody. Really, the only way that would happen, or the only way that would work for the New England Patriots, is if they brought in somebody who is unaffiliated with Bill, who comes in and runs personnel. And if that happens, then how is Bill going to deal with that? Like, is that going to be good for anybody? And nobody thinks that would be healthy for the organization, for the team, for anything. Bill would be, pissed off that some of his power's gone. He's probably had to take a pay cut at that time. And now he's having to deal with whatever players some guy he doesn't know gives him. Not a lot of people think that scenario could happen, that it's in the realm of possibility at all. I mean, I me personally, like I wrote in my column, it's the only way I see things working, that if somebody else is picking the groceries, because Bill can't do it anymore. And that's why they're here. That's the biggest reason why they're here. It's not the only reason, but it's the biggest reason. And I just, that's the only way I see it working. And I think, related to what you said about, the Jonathan Kraft video, where Jonathan's just like, we're not that good. We're not good, whatever he said. I think the Krafts realize it, and they have realized it. And you look at Robert's quotes over the years, over the recent times, about like the free agency splurge and how they didn't think they got much out of that, and how you have to draft. And so the Krafts know that the biggest problem, the reason why the Patriots have fallen off, is not Bill's game coaching and running a team, it's his personnel control. So if that's the biggest reason why I think if they made the decision, that's the reason that they were just like, Jonathan and Robert look at the team, we're just like, we're just not that good anymore. And that's just a fact. They aren't that good anymore. I remember you and I were having discussions about the roster, I think early on in training camp. And you know, I think we both voiced the opinion of, and I think the headline of the podcast was, this roster stinks. And it does. And, you know, they have some good players on defense, and a lot of their building blocks on this team are on defense. That's because that's Bill's wheelhouse. But as far as building a team, Bill Belichick is incapable of doing that anymore.
I don't see Bill allowing somebody else in that building to choose the future at quarterback. I don't see it. I don't see him sitting there saying, "Oh, okay, so you want to take Drake May? Good, sounds good to me." I don't see it. He's not going to allow that big of a decision to be made without him making it, because that has to directly impact his career, his record, the Shula record, all of that. Don't see it happening. Question I have for you, Greg. I don't think any of us know what the hell's going to happen here once the season ends and how this is going to break apart. And we'll get to Mayo in a few minutes. But I want to look at the contract. If the contract has certain language and gives Kraft some latitude to pull personnel from Bill and put him in an uncomfortable position, I think that's what we really need to know. That's the kernel of information that's missing here. Mm-hmm. But I see people say, Bill's not going to allow this to happen. And I understand that part. I would push back on that, though. And I did a podcast on the Nick Cattle Show, my own pod, going back a couple weeks ago, about how if this was to come to pasture here, it's an ownership deal. And I understand the idea of Bill saying, I don't want to go. But precedent has been set. Other head coaches, big-named head coaches, have been traded. It's 6 or 7 trades in the last 20, 25 years. The latest was Sean Payton. There's been this situation before when a coach doesn't necessarily want to coach there anymore, but he's under contract and they're trying to get rid of him. And people say, well, what if he just doesn't want to go and he'll force the team to fire him? But usually things get worked out. And I know Belichick could play hardball and all of that, but usually things get worked out. And my own personal opinion, don't know how you feel about this, Greg, that's because of ownership. Ownership does not like egg on their face. Owners like to protect other owners in situations. And if Belichick says, if they come to a meeting of the minds and say, we got to part ways, then I think the most likely path is that you go off of precedent, because that's what owners do in the league. And Kraft would say, look, this has happened, Bill, time and time again. It just happened with Sean, who's a friend of Belichick's. It just happened with Sean last offseason. We need something for you. And so that's what I go back to. And I haven't heard that a lot. Like, we've got to think about the upper tier conversation. Bill's not in this negotiation. Bill can say, hey, I don't want to, I don't want to go there. I don't want to coach there. But inevitably, working out a trade and working out a deal, that's an owner-to-owner thing. And usually what we've seen is that no matter what the contractual status is, dude's under contract, he gets traded.
Yeah. So related to that, Nick, a couple things that I can tell you that I do know. Number one is that their organizations have already started sniffing around Bill Belichick. I don't know how many. I don't know which ones, but I could tell you that that's happened. Now, do I think they've had direct contact with Bill? I highly doubt that. But at least there's some maneuvering. Hey, would do you think Bill would be interested in it, that sort of thing? I know that's happened. I do think you're wise to bring up the contract extension, because I had this thought the other day and nobody told me this. It was just, a thought that popped into my mind. I know a lot of people were consumed by the contract extension and why would the Krafts do that? And, could it just have been business as usual with Bill? Like, he gets to a certain point on his contract and they add on 2 more years or what have you. Yeah, that was That's probably the most likely scenario. But what if it was this? What if they gave Bill the extra year? Because after the disaster, and also something that I know is that the Krafts were like, they were okay with the Cam Newton year. They got their groove back with free agency, and Mac Jones, a promising year with a rookie quarterback, free agency, tweaks to the draft. They thought they were going in the right direction. And then Bill made his decisions once McDaniels left to do what he did with the offensive coaching staff. And that derailed last season. I know that pissed off the Krafts. And we've talked about it before, that the Krafts were not 100% sold on bringing Bill back after that. They needed to hear the right things. But what if part of all that discussion and about, Bill's future and the extension, what if they said, okay, Bill, we believe in you for another year. We're going to give you another year, but we want to tweak your contract. We want to work some language in.
Yep.
We want either, whether it was buyout or personnel control or coaching staff control, we want to change some of the language because we all know, we see the end game could be coming soon, later, we don't know. But as part of, it's time for us to do your contract again. This is what we want. In return, we're giving you 2024, a contract extension. To me, I think that's very possible.
Yeah, and everybody talks about Belichick's leverage in this situation. Not many people are bringing up Kraft. I believe Robert Kraft is a very smart man. I think he's a very smart businessman. And yeah, I'm sure there's things in the contract that help protect Bill, but I'm also sure that Robert Kraft has some things in that contract that protect him and the organization.
You bet your ass.
Yeah, I think it's foolish to just believe that Kraft would walk in there and be like, all right, well, Bill, we're just going to let you go and, have a good time. Again, owners are not like that, man. I'm telling you, owners respect precedent. That's why they never get kicked out of the damn league unless they do something atrocious or truly terrible like Daniel Snyder. Like, they stand up for each other. They take bullets for each other. And Kraft does not want to set the precedent of a coach leaving on a contract and not getting anything for him, especially when that coach is seen as the greatest of all time, just like Brady walked without anything in return. I'd also mention this, Greg, before we get to Mayo. As part of the Mayo story, Graziano brought up, ESPN.com, Dan Graziano, he brought up that the plan was, and this goes into what you just said, the plan was 2 more years of Bill, Mayo in 25. So with the transition of putting more on Mayo's plate, I think it's a legitimate question, Greg. How was the front office handled? If you're figuring out the transition and you're figuring out to the point where Mayo's going to take over 2025, then what was the conversation about the personnel part? Was it Belichick was going to stay on as the czar, as the personnel guy? Like you said, I can't imagine the Krafts would think that given the recent drafts he had, and Kraft has talked about how frustrated he was at times. So I can't imagine that was the case. So as part of that transition with Mayo, I do wonder, like you're saying, was there something in the contract that was put in there when they reworked it, gave him that year, and they said, okay, look, if it doesn't work out, there's got to be a split here. And I think Bill would understand that. I really do. So there's just a lot that we don't know. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah. Nick, let's dive into that, after the break, because there are a couple things about Bill and sort of his role in the end game and what people think he's going to do that I haven't really gotten into. And also, let's talk about Mayo and how sure do we think that he is the successor going forward. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I love the app. I use it all the time, all over the place. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, Greg, you mentioned before the break that you wanted to discuss a couple of things as far as Bill and the end game. Then we'll get to Mayo. First, your thoughts on Bill.
So, one thing that I wanted to make sure that I said, and look, sort of like what we were just talking about with the contract, we don't know what kind of contract tweaks were done with his extension that, might control things. But as far as people who know Bill, who know of Bill, who talking to them this week, they are almost in lockstep saying that there is very little chance that if the Krafts think they're going to get an elegant solution, that's going to happen. They just don't think that's they just don't think that's in the realm of possibility. They think that Bill is going to basically force Kraft to make a decision. That Bill's going to make Kraft fire him. Because he is, and Kraft might be like, well, Bill, we worked out this deal with, Jonathan has talked to his Harvard Law School buddy, Josh Harris at the Commanders, and he's willing to do this for that. And I think Bill still would say like that the Commanders would be interested in trading for you for a second round pick. You get to keep your contract and your compensation level and everything. Your contract just goes over there. And I think that Bill would say, I don't need your help on my contract. I can make my own contract. I mean, I just don't understand what people are trying to illustrate to me. Like, there's no upside for Bill other than to do Robert a solid. And does anybody think that Bill Belichick really cares one way or the other about doing a solid for Robert Kraft, a guy who is essentially firing him after winning 6 Super Bowl titles for him? I don't think so. So, a lot of people think that the end game for Belichick is that he is going to force Kraft to either keep him pretty much as is, or he's going to have to fire him. Now, he might agree to certain language in the release. Oh, we have decided to part ways. But most people think if Bill's not here next year, at the end of the day, it would be a firing.
Which goes back to the contract stuff that we mentioned earlier, though. Mm-hmm. I wonder if Kraft has an out and he can go to Bill and say, look, this is in your contract. So here's the deal. You're either going to coach with no say on personnel, or you're going to have to sit for this next season. Like that's how it is. That's the way it's going to be. It's all about what is in that contract and how much leverage each side has. And if Kraft has some power to say, I have the ability to change your job functionally, and you are either going to coach this team with no personnel say, or we're going to trade you somewhere where you can get the power that you want, Bill. And if those two options, you don't like them, I don't know. Maybe Kraft will say, you know what? You can sit then. I'll pay you out. You're 72 years old. You sit this season. Then try to get a job at 73. We'll play that game. We'll see. Again, there's been a lot of coaches that have had power, had contracts, all that stuff. Precedent is they get traded. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Belichick plays hardball. That's who he is. That's what he does. I think it'd be unfortunate if that's how it played out. But I think that Bill is he's already greasing the skids to get out of town if he's gone. He's already setting up the scapegoats. The Greg Hill interview, all these things that he has said over the past few weeks, I think is to set the stage to have no blame on him so he can go somewhere else and say, yeah, but I had Mac Jones. Yeah, but I had this. Yeah, but I had that. Let's get to Mayo. Graziano wrote about Gerard Mayo this week. Not 100% certain to be the guy, Greg, part of this report, and that this season may be causing Kraft to rethink the succession plan of Belichick to Mayo.
I would agree with that. In fact, I would probably be a little bit stronger on it. I would say that, and again, I'm just relaying what I've been told by people who know of the situation behind the scenes. The universal belief is that the chances of Gerard Mayo succeeding Bill Belichick to be head coach next season are low. For a couple of different reasons. I would say, and I'm trying to be careful on how I term this because I don't want to get aggregated to all hell like Tommy Curran and things like that. I'll just say that Mayo has, and I don't know if this is going to get to the Krafts or not, as far as what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know if anybody's telling them. I don't know if the Krafts are doing, I assume they're going to do their due diligence, like we talked about, talking to outside people, maybe people inside the building. I mean, I would think that they would do this at some point. I don't know if they have. But I'll just say that I think that Gerard this season, and I don't know if this went on before this or this is just the season after his contract extension, getting a little bit more juice, all that stuff. I think we talked earlier about, I think in training camp, I had heard from someone who said it was a weird dynamic in the building between, you had Bill Belichick, who's sort of playing out the string at this point. You have Gerard Mayo, who thinks he's going to be the next guy. And you have Bill O'Brien, who thinks he should be the guy, whether it's there or someplace else, that he's a head coach caliber guy. So there's a weird dynamic. I've just been told that Mayo has rubbed some people the wrong way this season, behind the scenes, on the staff, things like that. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to give any specifics. I'm just telling you what has been relayed to me. And again, I will also point this out. This could be some people with agenda. I will say the universal opinion of Mayo is that he is going to be a head coach someday. Just about everybody thinks now is too soon for him. And the other component of this, as far as if they move on from Bill, who succeeds Bill, is, it's not really in the Kraft's MO. Now we don't have a big selection. We have Pete Carroll, then they bring in Bill Belichick. So there was one. If this thing's going down the hill, and it's gone downhill recently, which we all know, they're losing season 3 out of the last 4 years, is it really wise to be like, okay, well, our solution to that is to hire somebody who's on that staff to be the next head coach? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially, and I think we've had this discussion where I've been like, look, if it's just going to be, Bill's going to be gone, yet everything else is pretty much staying intact, maybe a few more tweaks to the coaching staff, to the front office, and you're swapping out Bill Belichick for a Gerard Mayo, I said at the time, sorry, I'm not interested. I'd rather keep Bill. So, when they hired Pete, when they moved on from Pete Carroll, they didn't promote from Pete Carroll's staff. They didn't just hand it over to, whoever was there at the time, right, one of their coordinators or what have you. They brought in Bill Belichick. So the opinion from people that I've talked to is that if they do move on from Bill, they would love to keep Gerard, and maybe he's the defensive coordinator, but it's going to be somebody else, and it's going to be at least somewhat from the outside. I mean, to me, and I'm not saying this is likely or that I've heard this from anybody. I'm strictly in my own mind. But if I'm the Krafts, I probably think the best thing for this franchise is Mike Vrabel's the head coach, Gerard Mayo's the defensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator. Vrabel worked for O'Brien in Houston. Vrabel gets to pick who the personnel person is, and to me, that's almost the best case scenario for Vrabel as a quote unquote defensive head coach, because you have Billy O'Brien as offensive coordinator, who, like, let's be honest, probably isn't going to be on the short list of a lot of jobs in the coming years. So that gives some stability for having a defensive head coach. Again, that's just my opinion.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
That's all right. I was gonna say when we first started the conversation, but fortunately you answered this somewhat, because I just did my pod earlier today, and I had mentioned I actually think 2023 helps Gerard Mayo's case of being the next guy, given what we've seen. The fact that the defense hasn't quit, guys are competing hard, the game plans have been pretty damn good for most of this season. They've really produced without their two best players in Gonzalez and Judon. There seems to be buy-in from pretty much everybody across the board in Mayo as a coach on that side of the football. I couldn't see why this year would be an indictment on Mayo, since the defense is the one that's showing up week to week, and since there has been compete and buy-in. But what you just brought to the table makes things interesting. If he's rubbing people the wrong way. I'm glad you did bring up the idea, though, that this could be agenda-driven. Let's remember, as I said earlier in the podcast, when a team stinks, when the season's gone bad, people talk. And it's like that. It's like that television show, and I haven't seen the last 2 episodes yet, so nobody ruin it for me. But it's like Succession, where you're watching the show and everybody's got knives out at certain points. And so I just feel like there are agendas in that building right now. People are going to try to save their careers. They're going to try to save their jobs. We always have to be mindful of that. It doesn't mean that Greg's information is wrong. We just have to make sure, to point that out that, hey, look, there could be different reasons why people are saying these kinds of things. It's interesting you said that, the universal opinion is that Mayo's will be a head coach one day, but not necessarily right now. There seems to be a sea change. Because everything up until like the last week or so, what I've heard from, I believe, Burt Breer, Phil Perry, Tom Curran, everybody's been saying, unless there's like some late change for some kind of dramatic reason or whatever, Gerard Mayo's going to be the guy. So I find it interesting that there is some sea change happening now. And I don't know who's trying to change the quote-unquote narrative around Mayo, but there does seem to be somebody or some people talking to try to slow that roll down. I find that interesting.
Yeah, Nick, I totally agree, and good job by you, sort of pointing out, the inherent biases. And I'm just trying to be fair. That's all you can do as a reporter.
Right.
And you're totally right to point out that, like Game of Thrones, the stakes are never higher in this organization about what's going to happen, about futures for people. Like, there's a lot of shifting dynamics. And I think I'm getting really good information from people who have never shot me wrong, but I just can't rule out the possibility that, there are agendas behind the scenes to, it might be good for me if this person does that. It might be good for me if the Patriots do this. I just want to be honest with people. Reporting is not an exact science. I wish it was. It's not. I can only convey what I hear and then also give you sort of the background to make your own judgment as a reader, as a listener. That's all I can do. I mean, I've certainly reported on a lot of big stories in my career. This is very similar to me. I'm starting to get these feelings of Nick Saban's exit from the Dolphins to Alabama in 2006, bleeding into 2007. Very similar circumstances. It's a long time ago. I will say I was ahead of the curve on a lot of that stuff. I made a lot of my bones on that story, and I can just tell you, learned a lot of lessons from that, and it's informed a lot of things that I've done. But it's just these stories, man, they are a bear to report, and I'm just trying to tell people I'm trying to do my best and give the people the information, color it in different ways so that they can make their judgments at the end of the day. But I am conveying, if I'm conveying something to you, it's from people that I trust. Can I trust them in this circumstance? Nobody knows, because the stakes have never been higher for this organization.
Very fair. And before we get to the Chiefs game, I do want to mention that I do want to mention that Vrabel was brought up in the Graziano column as well. And so
he was?
Yes.
Okay.
He was. And so part of that, I'll try to pull up the note right now, but part of the idea is Graziano and a lot of others, including Greg, they've mentioned this idea of Vrabel. And when there's smoke, there's fire. So there's a reason why Vrabel keeps being brought up. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I will say on Vrabel, I'm not backing down. I know my reporting made a lot of waves in Tennessee. I've been called certain names about it, but I do think I think the world of Mike as a person and as a coach. We just saw it the other night. I mean, I do think he has his limitations as a defensive coach, just like Bill Belichick, but I do stand by that. my understanding, it would be worth it for the Krafts to check in on Vrabel after the season, that he might not love his situation in Tennessee and going forward. Now, whether the Amy Adams Strunk would play with that, play along with that as the Titans owner, I know she loves them. I don't know, but to me, I would expect the Krafts to check in on Vrabel once a decision is reached with Belichick one way or the other.
Here's what Graziano wrote just to close up that loop there. Mike Vrabel is among the other names mentioned in league circles as a potential candidate to succeed Belichick, though there's no indication a split between him and the Titans is imminent. So, but he does mention him. He gets him out there. One other note before we get to the Chiefs, I promise we're going long today, but it's great content in my humble, biased opinion. Mike Lombardi was just on Pat McAfee. And we know that Lombardi has lots to say when it comes to Belichick and Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And he was asked about the Tom Curran. I can't listen to the full clip, obviously, because I'm in the middle of doing the pod with you. But McAfee just tweeted out, a comment from Lombardi talking about the Curran story. Lombardi said, "I don't think Tom Curran would have put the story out unless he felt really comfortable with it. I think the timing tells me that the real message is we're not going to fire Bill Belichick during the season." I don't want to read too much into that, but Lombardi's not pushing back on the idea. So it makes you wonder if I think that makes Curran's report look even better, honestly. I think if Lombardi thought that this was not even, a possibility, he has no problem pushing back hard. And it doesn't seem, again, I haven't heard the whole clip, but from the quote on the tweet, doesn't seem like he was pushing back hard on that, Greg.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'm eager to hear what Mike has to say. I always do, especially on all things Belichick. I will say that, similar to what I said before, and about how Mike and Bill talk. It's always about. I don't know if Lombardi and Belichick would have discussed that about his future. I think their discussions would have been about the team and about the Chiefs, and that's about it. So,
all right, let's get to the Chiefs. Speaking of them, can Bailey Zappe take advantage of this Kansas City defense on Sunday, Greg?
So, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so. But I will say this, that and in my course of talking to people around the league, around the Patriots, about the state of the team and sort of where they're going, I'm asking them about Zappe, how he did against the Steelers and things like that. Everybody, the Steelers game was one thing. They think the Steelers are crap. Their scheme, the personnel, it was they weren't overly impressed with that. They do think his scramble, his first throw to Hunter, his first touchdown to Hunter Henry, really good stuff. The popular opinion, or the consensus, is just what I've told you. The Juju Smith-Schuster play and the second Hunter Henry play were fortunate. I mean, good that he made the throws, but pretty fortunate. And it being the Steelers, there's not a lot of people think very highly of the Steelers. However, they do think if Zappe goes out there against this Chiefs defense, against Steve Spagnuolo, Chris Jones, the cornerback, what's his name, who I love, Trent McDuffie, their safety, Reed, linebacker, I think Bolton's back. If Zappe goes out there and performs this weekend, puts up points against the Chiefs, if he does really well, that's going to impress a lot of people. This is basically, to me, this is Zappe's career right here. If he goes out and performs well against the Chiefs, that's going to open up a lot of eyes around the league, and whether that's in New England or beyond, it's going to open up avenues for him. Most expect Zappe to struggle in this game. The Chiefs do a lot of, blitzing. They do a lot of corner cat blitzes. Spagnuolo will throw crap up against the wall, and they don't expect the Patriots, to block it up or Zappe to decipher it. But if he does, and I'm totally leaving that possibility open, people around the league will be duly impressed.
Two things to mention here, and it's not to take away from Zappe. Look, if Zappe's good on Sunday, he's good on Sunday. We'll talk about it. I'll give him credit. I've said this before. I'll say it again. If Bailey Zappe could prove the football world wrong and prove to the world that he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, that's fantastic news for the Patriots. You got to pay that guy under $1 million next year, and you could put all of the money in draft picks towards the other holes offensively. Man, oh man, is that a huge stroke of fortune in the right side there for the Pats. But I will bring up two things. They've had extra time to prepare, so we have to keep that in mind. And I thought Michael Hurley from CBS Boston did a good job. He wrote about the differences of this Kansas City defense at home and on the road. Their past defense has been much different statistically on the road than at home. So you wonder if that's just kind of a freak thing or if that's something to keep an eye on Sunday that we should really pay attention to. As far as the Chiefs' offense, Greg, what's wrong there?
A couple things. It really starts with personnel. I think that, the receivers have just, gone downhill. I mean, people will be like, yo, look at Mahomes, isn't that good? Without Tyreek and all that. Okay, first of all, he won a Super Bowl with Tyreek. But he won a Super Bowl with elite Travis Kelce. I don't think Kelce's been right since he got hurt very early on in the season, maybe in the first game, like an ankle. He hasn't been the same guy. Is he still good? Yeah, but he's not what he was last year, which was completely dominating. You couldn't even double team him. He's not that same guy. And then, the rest of the lineup has taken a step back. I mean, from, Juju was productive there last year as like a number 3, and the personnel hasn't worked out. Not having Pacheco last week that's also tough for them to overcome. I think we recognize now that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not who we thought he was coming out in the draft. That he's going to be the super dynamic running back. He's terrible. And that Pacheco, my guy from Rutgers,
I was just going to say, Rutgers bias. Everybody keep that in mind.
That's right. He's just the dude's dynamic. He's a playmaker. And I think that, and also because of the issues with weapons, Mahomes has had to play almost entirely out of structure this year. Like every play that they make, it's him running around making a play. They got into that problem a couple years ago. When he's at his best, they have enough weapons that he can just drop back and get rid of it and distribute the ball. He can't do that anymore with these weapons, a lesser Kelce, no Pacheco out there. It's just, they're just not that good. And there's a ceiling to how much a great quarterback can do. I mean, just look at some of Brady's lean years when he had crap to work with, like in Denver in that AFC Championship game in 2019. Like, there's only so much these guys can do.
Quarterback is the most dependent position in all of football. Said it before, say it again. No matter how good you are at that position, you need others to work and others to help you to ultimately be as successful as you can be. All right, let's get to the line and let's get to our pick. First, I'll tell you this episode brought to you by FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. New customers receive $50. Scratch that, even better. New customers receive $150, Nick, in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Also, check out Greg and the fine people over at BSJ. $50 for the year. Bedard, Giardi, others doing great work there. All right, the line. Chiefs giving 8.5 on the road. The over-under is 37. So that would tell you Vegas does not believe the Patriots are going to score many points in this football game. So Chiefs minus 8.5, over-under 37, Greg.
Well, I'm going to let you go first, Nick, because I'm very interested because you were going with I'm not picking the Patriots until they win a game, which I adopted that last week, and I fell. Yep, I did. I totally jinxed you. So I want to give you the floor, and then I'll give you my pick.
I was 3-0 until Greg flaps his gums last week. All right, I'm going to go. The Pats did win last week, so the edict is over. I'm gonna go with the Patriots. I think they can stay within the 8.5 points. I think they can keep this Chiefs offense to 20 points or less. I honestly do. The Chiefs are now, of course, turnovers can happen, and if Zappe throws a pick six, but I'm going into this game. I think the Patriots defense can do enough against this Chiefs offense, which you brought up is limited. I think they can do enough to keep the Chiefs around 20. and I think the Patriots can score 13. So I'll go 20-13, Chiefs win. I'll take the 8.5 points. And, of course, with 33 being the final, that's the under 37, Greg.
So we are in the same ballpark, but I'm going a slightly different way. I think it will be close for a while. I do think that the Patriots defense will do a good job against this Chiefs offense. I think they will hold them down. I do think they'll hold them to 20, just like you said. The problem is I don't think the Patriots are going to score very much. I have this 20-10, so I am going with the Chiefs to cover and the under.
Man, I got 20-13. Greg's got 20-10. We don't talk about this stuff before we get on here. All right, we'll see how it all works out. Sunday, Chiefs, Patriots, 1 p.m. kickoff. No more Monday Night Football, of course. We will be back here early next week to recap that game. Until then, have a great weekend. Be safe. Have some fun. He's Greg. I'm Nick. See you.